What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be going over how you can actually get out of debt faster, and I'm going to be going over the exact steps that I took in order to pay off $65,000 in total debt over the last 2 years. All right, so like I said, we're going to be going over the steps that I took in order to actually pay off around $65,000 of debt over the last 2 years. And really quickly, this debt consisted of a car loan, it consisted of a personal loan, and it consisted as well of credit cards. So I had the 3 major loans besides a student loan all included in this process, and we're gonna break down exactly what I did to get rid of it. So I did a video a few months back about 10 sacrifices that I actually made in order to pay off $50,000 in credit card debt. And if you want to check that video out, I'm going to put a card to it right up here. You guys can check that video and click it out. It's going to be on one of these sides. And that is going to go over what I actually had to sacrifice in order to actually move the ball forward. This video, I'm going to be going over the different steps that I took, and the sacrifice will be included, but that one goes more in depth on all of the sacrifices that I actually took. So all right, so hopping right into this video, guys, number one thing that you need to do first and foremost is to increase your income. So whether you are currently making $30,000 a year, $60,000 a year, or you only make $10 an hour, the bottom line is that you need to make more money. So many of you, maybe you work full time, you work 9 to 5, maybe your hours are all over the place, but you work 40 hours a week. Some of you, if you work part-time, you really need to do this even more so. Get some sort of a side hustle or a second job. All of us say that we do not have the time, but the bottom line is, what are you committed to? Are you committed to actually getting out of debt, or are you committed to still doing things on the weekends and spending more money and racking up more debt and not actually fixing your situation? Like, what are you committed to? That's the first question I want to ask you. And if you are committed to doing this, then this is a step that you're going to need to take. There's other things that we're going to do moving forward in this video to actually decrease our expenses, but I think first and foremost, you should always be thinking abundantly. I don't think you should always be thinking of how can I pull back? How can I shrink? Because all that does is it really puts you into a scarcity mindset. For me personally, whenever I started to follow Dave Ramsey's steps to a complete T, they work. I'm not telling you that they don't work, but one of the side effects that I had from following Ramsey's advice was I started to think in scarcity. I started to think about, I have to save all this money, I can't spend anything. I started to be living in complete scarcity, and I no longer had an abundance mindset. And for me to actually get back into that mindset after paying things off was very, very tough. So by you increasing your income, you are thinking abundantly, you're thinking how you can expand, you're thinking how you can make more in order to actually pay things off easier. So some of the things that you can do would be drive for Uber, get a second job, whatever it may be. I actually made a video with different ways that you can make $100 a day. I'll put that card right up here. Watch that for different videos. But first and foremost is to increase your income. Step 2 is going to be to decrease your expenses. So the big 3 are what we're going to talk here. We're not going to talk about cutting out lattes and cutting out $2 things, and that stuff works, but again, that puts you into scarcity mode. And yeah, you should be mindful of what you're, spending your money on, but at the same time, the things that are really going to move the needle for you are housing, transportation, and entertainment. If you can decrease those 3, you will recover thousands of dollars every single month. So first thing that I did was I decreased my cost of living. I moved from Los Angeles, where I was paying $1,700 a month for a studio, to Las Vegas. Immediately, I saved $800 a month right off the bat just from doing that. In addition to that, I moved to a state that had no state income tax. So right off the bat, I saved even more money right then and there, immediately the second that I moved here. Step number 2 would be cut down transportation. If you currently have a car that you cannot afford, sell it, get rid of it. For me personally, I could afford my car. The car was not necessarily the problem. It was all the other credit cards that I had on top of the car, but the car was the biggest chunk of cash flow. My payment was $412 a month on my car. I had insurance of about $150. I had gas $200 to $250 a month. You know, by the time you add all of that up, it's an $850 expense every month just to drive your car. So if you are in a position where you work from home like I do, or you work very close to work, maybe consider selling your car. Consider walking to work, maybe taking the bus. If it's very close, maybe taking Uber is a cheaper option for you. For a lot of people, it's not gonna be cheaper because when you factor in 5 days a week on Uber, it's really not gonna save you any money. It's gonna be more money in the long run. But you have to evaluate this for your situation. If you are in a position where you're paying $800 a month for a car and you really don't need it, there's $800 that you can recover. And then on top of that, your housing, I recovered another $800 right off the bat there. So there is an easy $1,600 right off the bat that I was able to save every single month just by moving. And that's not even factoring in the state income tax that I was saving on a monthly basis as well. Number 3 is your entertainment and your food. Do not eat out. If you want to eat out once a week, eat out once a week. Like, set limits in place and stick to them. You have to have boundaries. I do not personally believe that you should just be eating beans and rice for years on end, because you're basically suffering. Your quality of life is going to be terrible. And I understand the notion of live like nobody else so that you can live like nobody else. I completely get it. But for me personally, I did not want to live that way. To me, that sounds terrible. It's awful. If I live that way for 3 months and then I get hit by a car and I died, my last 3 months of my life were complete. And to be honest with you, I do not think living that way is, again, a good way to think. You're thinking in scarcity. You're thinking of what can I take away and what can I reduce in order to actually, like, you know, pay this stuff off. And I do know that you need to decrease certain things. Like I said, your housing, your cars, there's things that we don't need. But when it's like your basic human needs of eating and operating, I don't agree with that. That's my personal take on it. I think that you should have a good quality of life. And for some of you, maybe that, you know, decreasing your housing might be something that you're not used to. Maybe you have to live with a roommate, but that's really not that bad of a situation, especially if it's temporary for a year or two. But to actually, like, you know, live in a smaller house, get rid of your car, eat beans and rice, like, I feel like it's just way, way, way too extreme. And most people are not going to psychologically be able to do that. I know that personally, that's not something that I wanted to do. I love exercising. I love taking care of my body. I love taking care of my health. I like eating healthy foods. So for me to go sacrifice my body and sacrifice my health just to be able to get out of debt faster was not worth it to me. I did not want to just be stuck eating shit that I did not want to eat every single day. So that would be step number 1, is to increase your income. Step number 2 is to decrease the big 3 as much as you can. If you have to move to another state, do it. If it's something that you're able to do, maybe move in with your parents, maybe get a roommate. There's a ton of different options you can do. But if you can decrease these 3 categories, you're going to save tons of money each and every single month. Now, step number 3 would be save up to have $1,000 in emergency fund. This is where I do agree with Dave. I think that you need to have some sort of an emergency fund. So if your car breaks down, you have some sort of, you know, you lose your job, I don't know, whatever the case is, you have something to fall back on where you're not reaching for that credit card and getting further into debt. Luckily for me, I never actually had to touch my $1,000. It stayed there the entire time. I had 0 emergencies come up during this time, so it was just there to have, and I had it in a savings account so that I didn't touch it. You can do this prior to actually increasing your income. It doesn't really matter how you do this. I just think these are the crucial steps that you should take to actually get out of debt. So now we're going to get into how I actually paid off my debt. Now for me, like I said, I had multiple things. I had a personal loan, I had a car loan, and I had credit cards. So I had a lot to tackle. The thing that I wanted to get rid of was the things that were causing the most cash flow strap on me, which was my car, my 2 higher end credit cards that I had with the big balances, and my personal loan. My personal loan had the lowest balance, so I attacked that first. It had a very low interest rate, but it had a low balance, and it was costing me $359 a month. So I wanted to just get rid of it because that would clear up a lot of cash flow for me. I could have paid off my small credit card balance first. That one was, I think, right around $2,000, but my payment on that was only like $60 a month. So that's not clearing up a lot of cash flow for me to pay that off. It was much better for me to pay off the personal loan with the higher payment first. Again, this is how I did things, and this is what worked best for me psychologically and best for me to actually attack this in this amount of time. Step number 2 was I paid off anything that had a promo balance. So I had my laptop, which is down here. It had a promotional balance that was a 18-month no interest purchase. So basically I was making the minimum payment on that laptop until it got to the very end. And what happens is if you don't pay that balance off by the promotional end period, all of the accrued interest gets tacked onto that balance. So I would have went from a $2,000 balance up to like a $3,200 balance. I would have had almost double the debt because of the interest accruing. So I wanted to get rid of something that was gonna cost me that amount of money first. Again, this is not in line with what Dave says, but why would I add $1,200 to a balance if I can just get rid of it? So for me, that was the next thing that I attacked. Anything with a promotional balance, which luckily for me was only my laptop. I wanted to get rid of that so that I did not have an additional $1,200 tacked on to my current balance. After I had the personal loan and the promotional balances cleared up, this is when I now tackled the credit cards. And for me personally, I had some very high balances on these credit cards. My smallest one was $2,900 after the promotional one. So the promotional one was really the smallest. So it did work out in the way that I attacked the smallest balance first. But even if it wasn't the smallest balance, I would have attacked that one first because of the interest. Now, behind that was my credit card for about $2,900. After that, my other credit card was at $5,600. The credit card after that was at $11,500. And the credit card after that was at $16,000 something. So for me, looking at those balances was insane. And if I had attacked just the $3,000, again, I was only clearing up a $60 payment every month. Yeah, it would have felt good to pay it off. Yes, it would have gained momentum. I think that the way that Dave outlines it does work the best for most people, because most people do not have the discipline to have money in their account. That's how they got themselves into this situation. But for me, what I did was I actually attacked the highest balance first. And this is completely contrary to what any of the approaches say. But for me, I felt like if I could just get that big one just out of the way, gone, then I could attack the other ones with ease and with confidence, because even if I got rid of the small ones first, I still had this gigantic mountain to face. So I wanted to face the hardest one first. So I actually saved up the full $16,000 to pay off that first one. After that, I saved up the $11,000 to pay off the next one. And then I went down from there. Now, again, this will not work for everybody, because many people, me included, prior to actually getting out of debt, I never had more than $1,500 in my account ever, because I was always in debt. So it was very different for me to actually see, holy crap, you have $10,000 in an account, you have $5,000 in the account. So for a lot of people, it could be very, very tempting to go spend that money, you know, and to get themselves even deeper into trouble. So this approach is not for everybody. If you are somebody who has a hard time controlling yourself, if you got into this debt because you were buying consumer stuff and you were buying a bunch of shit that you didn't need, then it's probably best for you to stick to Dave's advice. But for me, this is the way that I did it. And what this allowed me to do was, again, it allowed me to just get rid of that big one, give me the peace of mind that from here, like, this is all easy going from here, because the biggest one is done, it's gone, it's out of the way, we don't have to worry about that one anymore. Now, yes, I probably did pay more in interest, but It's the same philosophy with Dave's snowball method. You pay more interest by using the snowball method, but psychologically it works because you're getting small wins along the way. So for me, I had the same thing where I paid more interest, but psychologically I was relieved by getting rid of that really, really high one. And that's just what worked the best for me. And ultimately, that is how I ended up getting out of debt. It took me about 2 years to pay all of these off. And the way that I was able to do that was increasing the income. So I was making more money. I went from making about $30,000 a year when I first started doing this journey, all the way up to this year making almost $90,000 this year. So for me, that was a huge part of it, was increasing my income, diversifying my income, not using the credit cards anymore. Like, make sure that you're not using your credit cards after you do this and while you're doing this. Cut them up if you need to. Do whatever you need to do personally to get rid of them. There's a lot of people who say, I want to have it just in case of an emergency. Well, that's what your $1,000 fund is for. So your credit card is not there for an emergency anymore. You have the $1,000 for that emergency. And I mean, for me, this is just what worked. And this is the way that I did it, just step by step. So I know this, again, is not for everybody. Like, you have to evaluate what is going to work for you. For some people, it's Dave's method. You know, he has a lot of success stories, and a lot of people, you know, it works for them. Some people do the avalanche method. And for me, I kind of used a hybrid approach, using kind of the two, but in my own special way. But I was just, ultimately, you have to be sick and tired, as Dave says. You have to be sick and tired of being sick and tired to actually conquer this, to actually make this work, because it was hard. It was very, very hard. When I lived in Florida, I was used to going on dates all the time. I was used to going out. I was used to actually living, you know, a normal life. And when I did this, I mean, I completely shut out entertainment. I did not really go out to eat. I went out to eat maybe once a week to just kind of treat myself, to have something to look forward to for the week. But it was not like I was going to steak dinners. You know, I would go to like Subway or Chipotle. I would go out to eat like once a week just as a treat for myself. But really, the best way to do this is you just have to be sick and tired of being sick and tired. The pain of staying in the debt has to be greater than the pain of actually facing all of these obstacles and facing, you know, the temporary downsizing and the temporary kind of suffering that you have to go through. But at the end, I will tell you, like, you know, it just feels so much better on a day-to-day basis. There was times where I would be up late at night and I couldn't even fall asleep because I was so stressed out about money, and I was so stressed out about these payments. And even though I was making good money, all of my money was going to these payments. I was having nothing to show for it. So these are the steps that I took. Hopefully these help you guys. Again, if you know, are somebody who wants a strict plan and you need that momentum, then I highly recommend that you follow Dave Ramsey. But if you're somebody like me who has a lot of self-control, you're able to really do this, you're able to not care what other people think, you're able to just dial it in, then this might be the best for you. If you have a high balance like I had, this may be the best for you, because like I said, for me, once I just got that big one out of the way, it was just so much easier from there for me to keep going. You know, it wasn't like I had so much more to go. It was like, okay, we got that biggest one, now these other ones are easier, and that allowed me mentally to keep going. So if you guys like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and let me know what strategies you used, what worked for you, what you took away from this video, and let me know down in the comments below. Last but not least, make sure you give it a thumbs up, make sure you subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one.